The process starts with research and preparation. First, you'll need to analyze your current state practice act to pinpoint the exact restrictive language that is preventing us from being able to practice our craft.
So tonight, you all, since we're talking about legislation, it's really important to remember that we are physical therapists. We're not attorneys. And this podcast, we're bringing it to you as an educational component. Kirk and Karen both have tremendous experience in legislative efforts. And so together, they're going to have a conversation for us around legislation and how do you practice as an animal physical therapist. With that in mind, we've also provided you with a number of educational components. Tara will add these as links in the comment section here. The first one is why advocacy matters. It's an infographic, and Karen created that for us so that you understand all the component parts about why it matters. Why should physical therapists be in the mix? The second one is the Animal Physical Therapy State Practice Act matrix. And I pulled this together and thinking about this podcast and how do we clarify this for you all? How do we make it so that you understand if you are in a state where you can practice, what does that look like? If you're in a state that's a gray area, meaning it's not clearly defined, how can you practice? And then if you're in a no state, what do you do about not being able to practice? So that Therapy State Practice Act matrix will also be attached for you. Then we've also created a pathway for legislative change infographic. This actually walks you through the process of legislative change. Then attached is also an animal physical therapy issue brief. So as part of a legislative change, you'll need to create an issue brief at some point. I added an example issue brief, and it just has some details as guidelines for you if you're in a state that needs to do some legislative work. And then now I have a tremendous echo. Karen, can you hear us now? Okay.
Oh.
And then the final thing that we'll add is the Animal Physical Therapy Insurance and Risk Checklist. I want to introduce now our guest tonight. So we have with us Karen Atlas and Kirk Peck. I'm going to read their full bios so you understand the weight of the knowledge that they bring to our conversation tonight. Karen is a pioneering physical therapist, and she's the visionary behind Atlas Rehabilitation for Canines in Santa Barbara, California. She transitioned from 12 years as a human physical therapist to focusing on animal rehabilitation for her own dog, Teddy. She drew upon her extensive background in human physical therapy, and since moving to the animal side, she's helped revolutionize animal physical therapy by prioritizing clinical reasoning and incorporating innovative hands-on care techniques. She generously imparts her wealth of knowledge through engaging social media platforms, inspiring a wide audience with her work. In addition to her online presence, Karen has co-authored a chapter in the forthcoming third edition of Canine Sports Medicine and Rehab. She's a sought-after speaker and mentor, and she regularly shares her passion for the field with veterinary medical and physical therapy doctorate programs. Her devotion to mentorship extends to her role as a clinical instructor for Canine Rehabilitation Institute. Karen is a dedicated advocate for animal physical therapy and rehabilitation. She's actively contributed at local, national, and international levels. She played a pivotal role in the California Veterinary Medical Board's Animal Physical Rehabilitation Stakeholders Task Force. That's a lot of letters, Karen. And the International Association of Veterinary Rehabilitation and Physical Therapy Unity Group. In 2017, she founded Animal Physical Therapy Coalition, the APTC, to unite industry stakeholders, including veterinarians, physical therapists, veterinary technicians, and animal owners, to drive legislative initiatives and broaden access to animal rehabilitation, fostering interprofessional collaboration. Through Karen's steady and trustworthy leadership, the APTC has garnered widespread support and credibility among legislators and industry stakeholders alike. With unwavering determination, Karen embodies integrity, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to advancing the future of animal physical therapy through collective collegial policymaking efforts. In the show notes tonight, we'll add a number of links to all of Karen's coalitions, her website, and other places where you can connect with her. Karen, welcome to the podcast. Our second guest tonight is Kirk Peck. Dr. Peck received his BS degree in exercise science from Kansas State University, a master's in physical therapy from the University of Kansas Medical Center, and his PhD from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. His clinical expertise involves treating sports and orthopedic-related conditions in humans, horses, and dogs, in addition to providing physical therapy for Native American populations in an ambulatory clinic governed by the Ponca tribe in Nebraska. Dr. Peck is past president of the Animal PT Special Interest Group. He's a core instructor for the certification program in equine rehab at the University of Tennessee, and instructor for Sierra Peaks Animal Rehab in Denver. Dr. Peck serves on the board of a nonprofit, Ignite for Equine Athletes, spearheading several national and international presentations on horse and rider biomechanics. He also serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Equine Rehabilitation. Dr. Peck is an associate professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, where he teaches topics in clinical exercise physiology, health and wellness, healthcare systems, and political advocacy for the profession of PT. He's also the current chair of the Licensure Board of Physical Therapy in Nebraska. And tonight he brings to us from the Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapy Model Practice Act language for the practice of animal physical therapy. Kirk, welcome to the podcast. So I thought we would start tonight.
Thank you.
With a framing line, which, as I thought about legislation and animal physical therapy, it's really this, that when the laws are outdated, licensed physical therapists are boxed out of care. And just as importantly, animals lose access to essential mobility expertise. So what we're bringing tonight is, how do we move the field of animal physical therapy forward? And I thought we would start by setting the foundation. And Karen, we'll start with you. So why is this a particularly strong moment for advocacy? What's shifting now compared to previous years?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sasha. We are in a pivotal moment right now. There's a gap between what animals are needing, what the consumers are demanding, and what the laws are allowing for. And it's never been more visible than it is now. We're starting to really build the core base to bring out more visibility of our profession. And so because this is such a consumer-driven industry, and since they're asking for more access, the legislators and the regulators are recognizing the need now also, and they are needing to respond to the folks that are asking for this. So on one hand, we have a huge body of research that shows how animal rehabilitation helps pets, and we have the safety that has been demonstrated from the other states that have already implemented common sense laws to show the safety of it. So we have more post-professional programs that we've ever had before. So we have a lot of education opportunities now. And we have public and the veterinary community that's increasingly expecting to have access to rehab services for their pets as just part of the best, standard of care that we can provide. So many states are still with their outdated language of having, human beings as the main patient type that is being seen. So those outdated wordings is blocking the access to safe and safe care to animals and to skilled rehab services. So what's shifting now is the awareness that the regulators and the veterinarians and the physical therapists and the RVTs, they're getting louder. They're getting more seen in important meetings, and the national organizations like the APTA and the Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapy are talking to each other more. And so there's just the recognition that the outdated language is needing to change, is coming more into light. And so those things are, upwelling. And so it's getting more and more exciting. So to all of that makes this a great opportunity to get involved and to try to make the change that we all want to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Kirk, do you think you can kind of bounce off of that and explain? We have APTA published standards clinical practice for animal PT. Can you talk about why these standards are so important?
Oops. I think, Karen, you may have to mute yourself. There we go. We always have to mute in the thing. Are you referring to the standards of animal PT practice that we have published, or are you referring to our train line from APTA to Federation? Because if I was actually to first start with, if I could trail off what Karen just commented on, I think the other thing to think about is we have built more, we're gaining a critical mass. We're getting more PTs involved. And as more PTs get involved in particularly canine more than equine, I'm pushing to get more equine too. But in the canine world, there's this awareness that Karen talked about is becoming more real. And so the power of what we've done through the SIG historically was to utilize the SIG platform to do things to build the entire platform. One, when I was president, and even past presidents prior to me who started this as well, we finally completed a practice analysis that from the analysis, we were able to get the standards of animal PT practice published, which is still, I think, still loaded up on the SIG website and is free access to those who will look at it. That was a wonderful starting point because it allowed us to have some additional validity behind what we were doing as animal PTs, and sharing that with legislators, sharing that with also our own profession internally with other practitioners, but also APTA and the Federation of State Boards. So the beauty of this is we've kind of done a stepping stone process. For several years, we've had APTA had a position statement that basically opened the door saying, yes, APTA is in support of PTs collaborating with veterinarians so long as you have additional training and competency to treat animals. This is great. Then it moved to the level where when I was on the legislative committee with the Federation of State Boards, we were able to push after the Model Practice Act, 25 years history of the Model Practice Act. For the first time ever, we got the language for the Federation to support saying that we also agree that PTs can collaborate with veterinarians, but again, so long as you're doing it within the rule of law. So you need to have regulations. The Federation at that time did not create the regulations or the laws. They basically said you can do this with the laws and regs. Then the next stepping stone was, okay, after 2 years of this being out on the platform, I pushed the Federation, since I serve on a current legislative board in Nebraska, I still have a lot of connections and work with the Federation. I said, we've got to get these regulations done. And so they granted us this last year to run a task force. Karen served on this task force with myself, and Emily Rose was another PT out of Wisconsin, and some others from other states. And I won't go into all the gamut of that, but basically we successfully created basically a model regulation language, which is now approved by the board as of August of this year. I presented this at the Federation of State Boards annual meeting a couple of weeks ago, and is hitting overwhelming support. So all of this has been building into a stepping stone, and right now we have so much momentum for this. It's time for states to act, and that is the the plague here really is my push, and always has been since I was president of the SIG, was states have got to get these laws in place. There's only a few of our states, which we'll talk about a little later, that have the laws enacted. It works quite well. Karen, unfortunately, has been dealing with this in her state for many, many years, which I'm sure she'll share, to the frustration of the states that did this so quickly. And it's like, wait a minute here, why is California having such problems? But we're working on that. She's doing great work with that stuff. But this is the stepping stone that has occurred. So we see some of these successes. And what I hope now is the board members of these other states were asking a lot of questions at the Federation meeting. And now they have I said, there's one thing you can't escape with at our Federation meetings. I presented this twice. Once at the Federation leadership meeting in the summer and again at the annual meeting. I said, you can't walk away from here saying that you're unaware that PTs are treating animals because you've heard my presentation 2 times. You now know this is real. So the board members cannot deny it. The current board, this is why you need to capture those who live in states without the laws. You need to capture your board members now because they have heard the message. They're the current ones. They may be termed out tomorrow or next year, and then all of a sudden you've lost your momentum. So it's really now's the time to do it. And that's what I would say. We've got great things going, Sasha. The SIG has been very supportive of this all along, pushing these envelopes. And then for those of us very politically involved and have this weird interest of ours in the politics, just keep pushing the envelopes. And we're getting successes all the way to the highest level, which is our Federation of State Boards now, to get the boards on board. So we're very excited about this.
Yeah, it's incredible work. And as Kirk said, it's years in the making, you all. It's not like this just happened. It's literally baby stepping stones year after year. And Kirk and Karen have been in the trenches every little step of the way. So thank you both for all of your hard work and getting us to the point we are now. I think before we start talking about the yes, gray, and no states, I think we should take a minute to talk about Kirk, you mentioned in there how the Federation said, yes, you can practice on animals within your laws and regulations. So we talk a little bit about the difference between interpretation and intent of the laws. So can you just talk us through, like, what does that mean? The difference between interpretation and intent, and then what does it mean for physical therapies to stay within our rails, to stay within the scope of our practice?
Yeah, I get a great question. And I would kind of state it this way. This kind of came up in our task force in somewhat of a degree. When we think about animal physical therapy, one of the things that was brought up to our task force by a staff member who does not treat animals, but a PT, and the comment was, which I thought was kind of interesting, is you guys realize you're just practicing physical therapy on a different species. You just added to the population, but we're not changing our own personal scope of practice mindset of our skill set. We're using our current skill set taught to us in PT school, and we're transferring over with additional competencies, which we can talk about a little later too. When you get into the anatomy and biomechanics, there's differences in species, but what we're really doing is opening the door to a tremendous, huge open population for PTs. And hopefully the students online here and those listening later will realize that this is an incredible opportunity for us right now to do this. So that was the kind of our leading comment in our task force. And I thought that was an interesting approach to think about how we wrote out our regs when we drafted them. Then you get into the laws. So we'll talk about the laws. There's just a few laws that have intentionally codified language to treat animals. That means the intent was there when the legislators heard it, when the regulators heard it. What they were listening to was animal physical therapy. They were hearing that physical therapists were going to treat animals. That is 100% true intent of practice. They understood that was the language. In states where there's gray areas, there's no codified language, there's what I call loopholes. Loopholes allow maybe veterinarians to refer to non-licensed veterinarians to treat, but they never had an intention when they wrote that necessarily just to refer to physical therapists. They could refer to, other health professionals as they deemed fit. So the intent was never there by codified language. So when you really get to true intent, you got to look at, show me in black and white where physical therapy is included in that language for intent. And that is what we're trying to get to with the regulations that we created out of the Federation, was actual language that's flat out says animal physical therapy. And so we know what the intent is going to be. And that then doesn't leave it open to interpretation. The interpretation by any lawyer or anyone on the board can clearly see that was what your driven motivation was with the intent of PT. So I don't know if that answers exactly what you were asking for, but that's how I would interpret that concept. The laws that have the laws, I will say this, and we made this very clear in Nebraska when we changed our laws, was that you have to still practice within your scope of practice. We don't go do surgery on animals now or anything like that we don't do on a human, right? We can't do that in our human scope. So you stay within your realm of your scope. And that is clear. And our veterinarians that I worked with on this clearly said, look, we're allowing you to do everything you can do in your human scope of practice. You're allowed to do on an animal, but you're not allowed to go beyond your human scope of practice to treat on animals and do things. If it's not in your law, that would be practicing also out of your scope on an animal. And that's how they clearly viewed it. So you have to go with what's been codified, and the PT laws are still going to hold true no matter what your laws are. If you want to advance your scope of practice, great. And if you do that in humans, you should be able to also advance it in the animal world too, if it makes sense of how we're treating animals. But by and large, almost everything we do in the human practice is transferable into the animal world.
And I think to keep things simple, I'm not a legislative person. So in my mind, I have to simplify it down into a couple of sentences. So the way I look at it is, you may intend to only give advice, but if the state interprets it as providing a diagnosis or treatment plan, you might be out of compliance. And that would be for gray states or no states. So just really understanding that the way you carry yourself as a physical therapist in your state, based on what your Practice Act says, those are the boundaries that you need to stay within. So let's step now into yes, maybe, and no states. So Karen, do you want to walk us through the kind of yes and gray states? Like, how can you practice in a yes state? And then what does it mean to be in a gray state, and how might you practice in a gray state?
Sure. So on the yes states, it makes it really, really clear. So those yes states are states like Kirk's, Nebraska, and Colorado, and Nevada. So those are yes states, meaning that they actually went in and codified language to make animal physical therapy legal in those states. And they carved out within their Practice Act or the Veterinary Practice Act. It depends on what state you are looking at, whether they changed the Vet Practice Act, the Physical Therapy Practice Act, or both Practice Acts. And so it depends on, the politics of whatever given state you're looking at and how they ended up codifying those things on whether they went into the PT Practice Act or the Vet Practice Act or needed a change in both. So those yes states are intentionally worded with education standards, and gives all the parameters of what you need to do. Do you have to have a referral or a veterinary recommendation, medical clearance? So that's what you would need in Colorado, for instance, is a veterinary medical clearance. In Nebraska, I believe it's called a referral, and so it it kind of depends on what state it is, what wording they use on whether it's a referral or a medical clearance. And the yes states are Colorado, Nevada, Utah, Nebraska, and New Hampshire. And they just make it really clear. You have the education standards, when you have to send records to the doctor, when the doctor, it has all the parameters on what you need to abide by. For the gray states, like Kirk alluded to, they were really, those gray states are kind of loophole states. They're not specific language. It's not explicitly stated within the regulatory or legislative language. So California actually used to be kind of a gray state. So until the Veterinary Medical Board changed it in 2022 and made it a no state. So it was a gray state, meaning that a veterinarian I could practice under a veterinarian's direct or indirect supervision. So the veterinarian did not need to be on the same premise as the physical therapist practicing, as long as it was under the supervision, whether it was direct or indirect. Now in California, they changed that in 2022 and made it direct supervision only and made it a no state. So that's a contentious piece right there. And then, so that's the gray states where it's not explicitly stated. And then the no states are explicitly stated. And I believe New York is one of those that's explicit that you are not allowed to practice on animals at all under any degree of supervision. It is just, it's no. And so you have to look at your individual state practice acts because it matters from state to state. And that's what we're trying to do, and make our way through the states that are no states or gray states and get them to yes states so that we can move our practice forward and more animals can get treated.
And Karen, she got it. We're getting the mute thing down, kids. So Samra was asking about New York. And so what we want you to understand, and again, it will be in the link that's got the matrix, and it lists out all the states and if they're yes, maybes, or no states. And for example, in New York, if you're super, super wanting to practice on animals, you can go to vet tech school and then practice. So when you then are practicing, you're practicing as a vet tech, right? But you have a physical therapy skill set. So in states like that, it'd be really great to start to build some legislative momentum so that people understand what physical therapists bring to the state. Tara, I know you're back behind the scenes. Is there any way you can post that matrix for us in the chat? Post a link so people can see it, because they're asking about different states. And that matrix would have all those answers for them. So let's move on then to legislative efforts. So we have here about 25 minutes left in our podcast tonight. And I think it's really important for people to understand that if you're practicing in any state, yes, gray, no state, and you have found a path to do that, understand what the risks are of doing this. So to deal with that issue, there will also be that risks analysis sheet. So we're not going to get into all of that tonight for you, because you really should talk to an attorney, talk to your state boards, really truly understand all of that information. What we're going to do the rest of tonight is, with these experts online with us, we're going to walk through the legislative process. What is the legislative process? How do you do it? The fact that these guys have worked so hard to get us Model Practice Act language is great, but where do you plug that into the whole process, and what does it look like? So in our remainder of our time here, Karen, why don't you get us started with the basically infographic that you created for us, which was the legislative process. And why don't you just walk us through a few of those steps? And then when you're ready to turf one of those next things to Kirk, why don't you go ahead and send that his way? And then we'll just have the two of you go back and forth. Hopefully we'll make it all the way through to getting the practice acts changed. And then, yay, you practice animal physical therapy. So let's have you go ahead and start. What's the process?
All right. The process it starts with research and preparation. So first you'll need to analyze your current state practice act and to pinpoint the exact restrictive language that is preventing us from being able to practice our craft. So while you are searching through your practice act and trying to find out where that restrictive wording is, you should also be collecting evidence and determining the gaps in access to care and know what the economic impacts are. You should be following and documenting all the actions of the board members of both the physical therapy board and the veterinary board, so that you can kind of learn and understand who the players are in the game and who's all involved. And yeah, just make sure you document the history and the actions taken, really detailed, because the documentation will matter, especially if you're in a contentious state like California. The documentation really matters. So being able to go back on all of those things that, I have literally been through 4 different executive officers from the veterinary medical board. I've been doing this so long. I've watched people term in, term out. And so keeping everything documented for, I've been doing this for 15 years now in California. So my binder is very, very thick. And so doing the research and preparation is the first step. The second step is to identify some of your legislative champions. So you start meeting with state legislators, and you want to meet with people in both chambers. You want to meet with the folks that are in the Senate and in the Assembly, because you want to start getting the word out that this is something that needs to happen, needs to change. So you start focusing on those legislators who have special interest themselves in healthcare or animal-related healthcare, veterinary medicine, and or small businesses, because there are a lot of legislators that are wanting to increase small business opportunity for folks, and this is a niche that is very small business oriented. So that falls nicely into that category, should that particular legislator have a certain interest in it. So you do want to approach, you need to do research on what the legislators are interested in. So you're not going to really spend a ton of time on those legislators that, have their interests in and made promises to their constituents surrounding other topics. But if they're made some promises to their constituents based on healthcare or animal legislation or things that, that they've shown interest in that align with this, then you want to try to get in with those conversations. And it starts with, sometimes it's just doing a call to their office and meeting with the staffers at first, and get the staffers to understand what's going on, and then they'll hopefully level it up to their boss, the legislator, and then you keep the ball rolling in those conversations. The next step is to craft the proposal. You want to start drafting precise statutory language. So the states that are the no states are the ones that use human beings or persons as their descriptor of physical therapy. So their definition includes humans or persons. So that's kind of what needs to change to client or patient. So you want to develop clear messaging centered on patient safety, because this has been shown to be a safe craft when a veterinarian is involved providing the initial evaluation and has determined that physical therapy is a safe practice for that particular animal and has made the referral or medical clearance, then those safety measures need to be widely talked about with the legislators, and the regulatory boards, because their main goal is one of their main goals is to not only increase access, but to make sure that access is safe. And so they need to make sure that they are keeping the people of their states safe with any practitioner that they allow to be used. So you can use evidence in states like Nebraska and Nevada and Colorado and Utah to show the safety. The next step would be to increase stakeholder outreach and advocacy. So you want to host informational webinars, such as we're doing now for PTs and veterinarians. Use the power of social media to help get the word out. What we're trying to do is really increase the groundswell. You want to get this so that people are talking about it, so that legislators are going to want to make the change for their particular constituents and make this an important issue within your region of your state. Now, California is so big that we have needed to, you have to show support in all parts of the state. So I can't just from Santa Barbara go, yeah, we need to change this for the whole state because Santa Barbara wants this. That's not how it works. You need to show that there is interest and desire and the need all in all regions of the state, so that each legislator from every district is getting the same message, and that it gives them motivation to want to make the change, to vote for these things, so that they can please their constituents who voted them into their position. So mobilizing members to send letters to their legislators, to get emails in, provide testimonies to legislators. Really, the advocates need to be representing each area of the state. And then passing legislation is really expensive, really costly. So fundraising is also an important piece of passing a piece of legislation. What I needed to do in California is, since we didn't have the groundswell when I started working on this way back when, I was showing up to the regulatory meetings year after year and started to notice that it wasn't just the physical therapists wanting this. The veterinarians wanted this too. So they've been wanting to be able to refer their animal patients to be able to interprofessionally collaborate with physical therapists. So since their own trade association, so in California, it's called the California Veterinary Medical Association. That is their trade association, whose job it is to protect that profession, the veterinary profession. But their stance was not aligned with many of the veterinarians that we know in practice, because the many of the veterinarians in practice want to be able to interprofessionally collaborate, and CVMA's position was not that. So I created the coalition to bring us all together, because I've noticed that we really want the same thing. So instead of it having it be like PTs against veterinarians, it's not really like that. It's more of an us versus them, but that them is not veterinarians. It's the model of what the CVMA wants, which is direct supervision, versus another model, which is let the veterinarian decide the level of supervision, whether that be direct or indirect supervision. So this is not a vet versus PT at all. This is a turf battle, because many of the veterinarians, all the veterinarians I know personally and that I work with on a daily basis, want this to happen as well. So I created the coalition to bring all the unified voices together, so that because those veterinarians were not being represented by their own trade association. So I created the coalition so that we could all be advocating together, and that's been an effective strategy. It's worked quite well. All right, so the next step on the little train, the pathway to legislative change, is to engage legislative support. So you want to focus first on the policy committee members in the House of Origin. So this starts to get kind of politicky. So I don't know how deep we want to go into those kinds of things, but you do, on big picture wise, you want to understand that early collaboration reduces opposition later during the legislative process. So preparing an issue brief and highlighting the public safety, highlighting professional qualifications and education, and then being able to describe the economic impact and the growth of small businesses, and show how the benefits to both animals and people are driving this piece of legislation. So making sure that you have a clear message is important. The next step is to, while you're in the legislative process and you have your bill, you are now working with the sponsoring legislator to be able to formally introduce the bill, attend committee hearings, and provide expert testimony, engage in letter writing campaigns to the legislators. So you also want to be available for really quick and rapid response to any of the amendments or questions from the lawmakers and staff. So you can be as prepared as possible and then be waiting. And then all of a sudden at the 11th hour, you get a call or email, and then it's like, okay, is this good with you? And you start negotiating and start going back and forth, and it becomes kind of pretty stressful because you're on a time crunch. But it's interesting how the process works, because you want to prepare and do as much preparation as possible, but sometimes the legislative process is not that way, and you just have to learn how to bob and weave with the process, because it's an interesting one, and you kind of need to be flexible and have a certain readiness to be able to make the responses that are required. Then it's time for the passage and implementation of the bill, which I hope to get to next year. You want to track the bill through both the chambers, the Senate and the Assembly, and then until it reaches the governor's desk, in which case you can go through the whole thing and then get to the governor's desk and have them veto it. So you can, so you want to follow the bill very closely through to the governor's desk. You want to then meet with governor staffers and show them how important this bill is. And then you'll get to and then hopefully you get the passage and signature by the governor. And then you are then on to educating practitioners about the new law and how to stay compliant with the new law. So there's a lot of steps that go through it. I'm just going to take you through some of in California, and I believe the rest of the states. So you have a Senate and you have an Assembly, and depending on which side of the chamber you start on. So say you have an Assembly bill. So that's what ours is Assembly Bill 1458. So I have an Assembly member sponsoring or being the author of our bill. His name is Assemblymember Wallace. It's fantastic. Assemblymember Wallace. So it's AB 1458. So it starts on the Assembly side. So then it starts in its first policy committee. So in California, it's called the Business and Professions Committee, and Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. And so then it goes through the first policy committee on the Assembly side. Then it goes through Assembly Appropriations, and that's the Money Committee. That's deciding on whether they're not even looking at the policy in that committee. They're just looking at whether it makes sense for the state fiscally, and whether it's worth it fiscally for the state to spend the money on implementing such a bill. And then once it passes appropriations, then it goes to the floor, the Assembly floor, and that's where the floor vote goes, and that's where you get all of the, the whole Assembly to then vote on it. So you make it all the way through the Assembly, and then you do it all over again, and you go through the Senate side. So Senate Policy Committee, so that Senate Business Professions Economic Development Committee. Then you go into Senate Appropriations, which is the Money Committee. They're not looking at policy, they're just looking at money. And then it goes to the Senate floor. And so it goes through those 6 steps, and then it goes over to the governor's desk. So there's 7 major steps for bill passage. And at every single step, you need to have a letter writing campaign, and because it's in front of a new committee each time. So the old letters don't count anymore, because those letters were written to the first policy committee. So now so it takes a lot of advocacy work to get, you first get someone to write a letter, and they go, all right, I wrote you a letter. I'm like, all right, can you write 6 more? At the next time. So you're constantly asking for letters, but they make a difference. They totally make a difference. If they're uploaded in California, they have to be uploaded to the legislative portal in order for them to count. So, but I tell you that they look at the legislative portal uploads, and they matter. So when we do our calls of action to say, hey, can you upload a letter? Or maybe it's not even a letter, maybe it's just a position, and it takes 5 minutes to go into the legislative portal and press support for AB 1458, and that comes out and then the legislative consultants read all of those and then tell their boss how important this is, and how well it's going. So it is quite a haul, but I think the most important thing to know is how this all works, because once you know how the system works, then you can make effective change. If you don't, then you can spin your wheels in all sorts of different ways, and you think you might be making the right headway when actually you're not really talking to the right people, and you end up spinning your wheels needlessly. So you need to have a clear pathway on how to make the change. And you do need to hire lobbyists. I know it sounds like a dirty word, but it's really not. Like, I know some lobbyists are, but I have fantastic lobbyists who are just so honest and committed and understanding that this is the right thing to be doing. And it's just a real honor to be able to work with lobbyists that are trying to do good. And those are the ones that we have for the APTC. And it's a joy to be able to work with them. And we've made a lot of progress because of that. You do have to hire lobbyists. I wanted to do this without lobbyists in the very beginning. I'm like, oh, sure, it's no problem. Everyone's like, we're not even asking for that much. All we're asking for is for the to allow a vet to refer to a PT. How I'm sure it's just because they don't understand what we're asking for. I think this is my thought in the beginning. I'm sure that they're thinking we want direct access or something, and they don't understand. So maybe if I just go and explain it, then they'll understand. Well, that's not really how that works. They understand. I thought they didn't, but they understand, and they just don't want it to happen. So yes, my visions of trying to do this without a lobbyist, because it was so common sense, was super naive. And I had to I had a harsh realization of the true politics that are behind all of this. It's not kumbaya at all. So
Karen, thank you so much for walking us through that whole process. And y'all, in the chat here, Tara has actually put that process for you in the infographic so you can see. She's posted the example of an issue brief so you can see kind of what that looks like. What I'm wondering, though, from the people who are on with us tonight is, it sounds, Karen and Kirk, like there's a lot of steps, and that at each step, there's probably a lot of important information. Like what I'm hearing you say, Karen, is getting buy-in before and as you're going through this process is really important. So you're not just kind of connecting with people and they're cold to the process. So what I'm wondering is, are the people who are on this podcast tonight, would it be beneficial for you, if you're interested in legislative efforts, for us to do some micro legislative talks, like having Karen and Kirk potentially do a podcast just about like, how do you do step 1 through 3? Right? Because I think now, because now's the time, you all, I mean, it really is. We're building a groundswell, like Kirk said. We've got language from the Federation now. We've got highly experienced people who've been going ahead and building these pathways for us. Now it's our job as licensed physical therapists to move the process forward. As much as I want to support you, every single one of you, from APTA, Animal SIG, We cannot go to every single state ourselves and do this work. But what we can do is put power to the people and really help you understand how to go through the process. So if you guys are interested in that, please post it in the chat here, and we can consider how we might do that and what that might look like for you all. Because we understand this is a lot of information, but we really wanted to share with you that the process can happen. It has happened in these states. I mean, I'm practicing in the state of Colorado. Our pathway is really clear. I don't think about legislation at all right now because they went ahead of me and did it. So now I get to just stay within my rails, stay within my practice act, do incredible work. And I think then it sounds like people are really interested in doing this. So maybe what we'll do is through the Animal Physical Therapy SIG is maybe I'll work on sending out a questionnaire to people to see how many people are interested, and if people are interested, what that might look like. Like, is that a Thursday evening Q&A session where we go through steps 1 through 3? Like, what does that look like? So why don't I pitch that then out to the entire APTA SIG? So if you're not members of APTA SIG, you'll still receive that if you're on the podcast tonight, because you'll get the follow-up information. So any final comments, Kirk, Karen, before we wrap up tonight? I know it feels like we could talk for 3 or 5 more hours, which we sure can. But anything else specifically for everyone listening tonight?
I would just comment to add on. Karen did a nice job with outlining a lot of making politics look so glamorous and fun, as it always is. I would just say you got to build advocacy through your state chapter. You have generally a legislative committee in your state chapter that can help you with this process. Your state chapters, most of them, not all, but most of them already have their own lobbyists that might be able to, they're very full of information. They will tell you if these issues have come up before or not. In your states, you also need to look into attorney general opinions that may have been already printed in your state as well. So there's some other areas here. But you know what? The path has been made easier by the fact that we had our task force. We have a model language to share with regulators on the boards. So all you really need to do in the state practice laws is get rid of the human reference and move to patient-client, which is the Model Practice Act language, and the rest can be done in regulations through the board. A whole simpler path to do this, and that's how we did it in Nebraska, and it was a lot easier path. So I think this would be great if we could get onto some Q&As and other stuff. There's different approaches depending on what the state laws are in each state, and it'd be great to hear from the people on online here and others who weren't able to join us tonight about that path in states, because I am aware of some states that are going to try and move the needle in the next year or two as well that currently don't have laws, and so I'm very excited to help with them as well.
And a couple of just notes from the chat here. So for you all who are saying, hey, we need to team up with people in our own state and build coalitions. Yes, you do, 100%. So what if you all start creating your own networks at your own state levels? Find your physical therapists that you already have a physical therapy state board, and I think that that's a great place to start. See if anybody on your state board is already working on stuff for animals. If they are, join the party. I know 5 or 6 states right now where people are actually working on things already. So definitely reach out to your state boards and see what they're up to. Join the party if they have it. And then it looks like we have someone joining us tonight from India. I don't know anything about practice acts in other countries at this time, but Dr. Sharma, I do think that doing some canine rehab, you might be able to connect with some other people internationally and see what you think. And then it looks like we have people, Hawaii, appreciating the language is changing. Yeah, you guys, you're so well. I'm just so glad everybody joined us tonight. This has been an incredible conversation. We appreciate you all. Please look for the people at your state. I will work with Tara at APTA to see if we can send out a questionnaire to get smaller groups of legislative education going. And we'll go from there. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you. Karen, thank you for all your wisdom. Kirk, thank you for being in the trenches. I don't know, 20 something years now you've been doing this for us. So both of these guys, you just incredible work. If you ever see them in the halls at any conference, definitely walk up to them and tell them thank you for all the work that they've done for us. It's a long haul, it's a lot of work, and we appreciate you both. Thanks for coming on tonight.